I would like to preface this video with a statement. Piracy is illegal and is a federal crime. I do not condone piracy in any way, shape, or form. It's also important to state that I myself am not a pirate, that I merely serve to justify the actions of other dangerous thieves among us. All of this video is meant to be taken as satire and parody. Please don't sue me, I don't know how the law works. Okay, I know that title is like insane, but I am serious. I do not only fully condone, but I am in support of piracy. Now your first thought right after, wow Gizpacho, you're so based, is probably along the lines of, why? And if you had that thought, you're the exact person I wanted clicking on this video. There is still plenty of people who are still against piracy and emulation and what have you, and I want this video to show you my point of view on stealing things. In this video, there's going to be a lot of different terminology and words used to describe what I'm talking about, so I'm going to quickly throw everybody through a crash course of criminal lingo. Piracy, freebooting, buccaneering, all refer to the act of illegally acquiring a digital piece of media. Most of the time. Essentially any way that the copyright holders don't want you acquiring something they own. If you've ever downloaded a song illegally off YouTube, congratulations! You're just like me! Now that's the piracy side of things. Emulation is a very different but very similar story. I'm going to be using the word emulation to refer to video games solely, so anytime I bring it up, just assume I'm talking about video game. Emulation, when used on a computer program, copies or imitates a specific piece of hardware made to run a video game. If you get a PlayStation emulator, that program is mimicking a PlayStation. Basically, the criminal's console. Except this window is my state-of-the-art PS5, and this file known as a ROM is probably Bloodborne. That's a virus. Now, when most people think of piracy, their first thoughts are probably the scarier ones. Viruses, yarhar fiddly dee, stealing is not alright, you see. You wouldn't install a motor vehicle, but personally, I believe it's more nuanced than just buccaneering equal bad. I personally believe that piracy exists for a very good reason, especially today. And I'm not just talking about emulating video games. This extends to shows, movies, music, and even books. In my eyes, freebooting shouldn't be seen as theft, but more as a byproduct of how the entertainment industry has shaped out. So let's go format by format, and I'll try to justify to you why I condone piracy. Starting off with what I feel like is my strongest case, but also the inspiration for this video: TV shows and movies. You see, recently, I got into Doom. One of his albums I've been particularly enjoying is The Mouse and the Mask. Not only because all of it's amazing, but also because of its theme. Pretty much every song on the album has something to do with an Adult Swim show. Harvey Birdman, Space Ghost, Aqua Team Hunger Force. And because of this album, I got really interested in a lot of Adult Swim's earlier works. Where the hell can I watch most of that? The first one I wanted to check out was Space Ghost from Coast to Coast, which thankfully is available mostly in full on Adult Swim's website. What do you mean it's going to expire in November? Here is one of my biggest arguments for piracy: preservation. Yes, I can watch a majority of these cartoons I want on streaming services such as HBO Max, Hulu, Disney+, YouTube TV, but who is to say what I want to watch will be there when I want to watch it? Look at this now infamous photo taken in 2020 of an HBO Max billboard. None of these shows are now available on Max. What is available to watch and when is completely up to these whacked corporations. The only ways to watch Space Ghost from Coast to Coast legally right now is to either pay $82 a month for YouTube TV, $18 a month for Hulu Premium, or sift through millions of ads and watch it for free with Adult Swim's website or Sling TV. Those last two are definitely the preferable ones if we're talking legally, but as I said a minute ago, this is going to expire from their website pretty soon. Then I'll be left with 3 options. And what happens when none of these streaming services want to host the Ghost anymore? Of course, the next option you might propose is to own it physically. Well, that brings a whole slew of other problems. For Space Ghost specifically, the show got 11 seasons. And only 5 of them got DVDs, and the seasons that did get preserved physically are stupidly hard to find. Space Ghost, I feel, is the perfect example of that preservation argument. In the future, if all of these companies decide that Tad Ghostal isn't worth their while to preserve, without piracy, Space Ghost would be completely unwatchable. Over half of the show isn't available physically, and then the rest of it's only like 4 services. But Space Ghost Coast to Coast is a more niche example, I'll admit. What about more popular shows and movies? How about something that Disney owns? Like one of the most popular TV shows ever, The Simpsons. Something like The Simpsons you would expect to be reasonably preserved forever, right? Loads of people always want to watch it, all of it's preserved physically. This should reasonably defeat my argument. But what if I told you I think that actually boosts my argument? The Simpsons has 36 goddamn seasons, which all of it's available to watch through Disney+. I lied. There are various different episodes that got cut for many different reasons. Season 3 episode 1, Star Raving Dad, was cut from circulation due to the inclusion of Michael Jackson voicing one of the characters. It isn't available anywhere digitally legally. So if you would like to watch the episode, you would need to buy a Season 3 disc. And those are only available secondhand. That also comes with the expectation that you have a DVD player, the right cables to connect it to the TV, a TV with the right output, and space for all of this. I've stated this before, but I live in a camper and simply do not have the space for all of this bulky technology. Nor do I have the space for 36 DVD cases. So streaming doesn't have a complete list, and to have all of it myself, I would need a space for that, which I simply don't have. But there is a third option. I understand that this and The Simpsons are two pretty niche examples, but just because it's niche doesn't mean it shouldn't be exempt. What happens when it starts not becoming niche? What happens when more celebrities start getting their cameo episodes pulled from different pieces of media? Allow me to walk you down some hypotheticals real quick. Weird Al Yankovic gets in some real hot water. I'm talking Diddy levels of bad. And now a bunch of different networks want to pull anything and everything revolving Weird Al. The entirety of the Weird Al Show, Milo Murphy's Law, his movies UHF, and Weird the Al Yankovic Story would all just be fucking nuked, and then all of the other shows that would be missing entire episodes, such as Wander Over Yonder, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, Back at the Barnyard, Close Enough, The Brack Show, Gravity Falls, Teen Titans Go, My Little Pony, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, The Grim Adventures of Bill and Mandy, Uncle Grandpa, every episode of Adventure Time featuring Banana Man, and worst of all, Annoying Orange. And to tie everything back around, they would also have to remove various episodes of The Simpsons and an episode of Space Ghost. You might be thinking it's entirely unrealistic that a bunch of different companies would just remove buckets of content like this, but they did it for Michael Jackson. Why would they stop there? You can't even make the argument to that point that those shows still have physical editions because shows like Scott Pilgrim still don't have one. You can take the blindfold off now. We're back to reality where Weird Al is still the saint he is. But you get what I'm saying, right? Let me run you through another hypothetical real quick. You want to watch Creature Commandos, which is only available on streaming right now. But what's this? James Gunn just went into a Walmart and killed 5 people with a shotgun. Well, shit, HBO just pulled it from streaming because they didn't want to be involved with the shotgun Walmart controversy. Now Creature Commandos is entirely gone. Dozens of TV shows and cartoons nowadays only get releases on streaming. If it wasn't for piracy, the fate of these pieces of art would be in the hands of some bigwig sniffing out tax breaks. I personally am frankly uncomfortable with relying on companies like Max who have their fingers on the trigger of whatever can save money. So that's my main argument in favor of stealing shit. Some of the goody two-shoes among you might still disagree with me though. So what about buying things digitally instead of streaming them? Well, I don't really think there's a great solution there either. You see, streaming is like going into a museum to watch these shows. There's a small fee at the door and you get to look at everything. Buying digitally is like renting out one of these art pieces from the museum. You get to take it home and you can have it in your house. It surely costs a lot more, but you get to own it, don't you? Well, what happens when the museum wants their art back? You see, most shows, movies, pieces of music, video games, and pretty much anything digital needs to be licensed. And what happens when those licenses run out? In December of 2023, PlayStation was set to remove all Discovery content from their digital store, which would have been fine if their plan wasn't to also remove it from people's libraries. Anything you had purchased that was by Discovery would have been removed without your consent. They did double back on this when licensing agreements changed and they could keep it there, but what if they didn't change? What if they did go through with this and people did lose their things? You call it unrealistic, I call it almost happened. This gets worse when we look at the gaming side of this. Luckily, most game ownership is still physical, but as we drift closer and closer to digital-only consoles and primarily using Steam, how much longer will that really last? If PlayStation can remove over 1,000 shows and movies from somebody's library, how much longer is it really going to be until they start going to games next? At least film has the advantages of being only watchable. What I mean by that is it doesn't require any other bells and whistles but your eyes in a stereo in order to be experienced. Video games need a lot more, and plenty of games are online only. And eventually when these games stop making money, they get shut down, meaning they are lost forever. All of that hard work put in by the developers to make these pieces of art are all flushed away, never being seen again. A slam dunk case of this, and quite possibly the easiest and most noteworthy example I could give, is Jumpstart Quest for the Color Miser. In 2022, Jumpstart Games faced a lawsuit due to one of their games, Neopets, accidentally leaking hundreds of users' data. And because of that, probably, the studio shut down, taking all of their online games with them. When I learned about this last year, I was really upset because when I was younger, I loved Jumpstart. That was until I found fan servers had brought the game back to life and it can be played again. Legally speaking, there is no way to play Jumpstart Quest for the Color Miser, but thanks to Piracy, these games can live on. And that doesn't even stop at only online games. Pretty much every Telltale game was taken down from Steam and most digital storefronts after Telltale went under. Yes, you could still get the episodes for some of these games physically, but they require the internet to get the rest of the content, which is now unavailable. Poker Night the Collection, Minecraft Story Mode. Regardless of how good or bad you think these games are, they deserve the right to exist. And without Piracy, they wouldn't anymore. A bunch of Cartoon Network mobile games got removed from Steam recently. If not for Piracy, these would be gone forever. Multiverses is shutting down soon, you get my point. Really, can you blame a lot of people for pirating stuff with everything I've said in mind? At any moment, anything on streaming can be pulled. Anything from your digital libraries can be pulled, and going physical requires a lot of money and a lot of space. I frankly don't feel comfortable a lot of the time giving away my money to a company like PlayStation because at the drop of a hat they'll fuck me over out of whatever I just purchased. Is piracy really that bad of an option when this is what it's up against? This preservation angle can really be applied to anything. Has a book been banned from all digital storefronts because of some new law or the author going into a Walmart with a shotgun? It'll always be available on the Internet Archive. Has a song been taken down because the artist who made it has gone into a Walmart with a... You get the gist. When you buy something digitally, you aren't really owning it. And if buying isn't owning, then is piracy really stealing? To circle back around, I made a joke earlier with downloading cars, and I think that specific commercial where that joke is made from is really missing the point of what piracy is. In it, it brings up other stuff you shouldn't steal, like a handbag, a television, and a car. But the thing is, all of those are physical possessions that real people own. Is anybody really losing money if I just want to watch fucking Space Ghost? And to add on to that, when you steal something physically, you are making one less of that thing. But if you steal something digitally, you're just copying it. If I pirate a film from a film piracy site, they're not gonna say to the next guy who wants to watch that, sorry, shitfart27's watching that right now, you have to wait till they're done. To say that this is stealing is to imply that this works like a blockbuster. If I steal a handbag, then only I have a handbag. But if I copy a handbag, then we both have handbags. Look, I think you get the point, I'm moving on. So this Yoho discussion has mostly been about older and now unattainable pieces of media and art. What defense do I have for pirating a show like Invincible? A show that is actively receiving new episodes, meaning it's not going to get pulled for a while, it's all available in full. Most of the stuff I've set up until now doesn't really apply to it now, does it? Well, yes. This leads into my second argument in favor of piracy. Protest! I brought it up briefly earlier, but Warner Brothers, the owner of Max, aren't exactly the greatest when it comes to being consumer friendly. You've all probably heard this story, but it feels important to echo it again for this video. In 2023, Warner was gearing up to release Coyote vs. Acme. It was going to be a true successor to the live-action animation hybrid films of old. Think Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Space Jam. But instead of giving us a really cool movie that dozens of creatives have poured all of their energy into, they decided to write the whole thing off, shelve it, and get a $30 million tax break. I am somebody who loves the live-action hybrid films, so somebody like me was predictably pissed off. It doesn't matter if you don't care about the film, what matters is the precedent it sets. I don't like that Warner can just do that. Throw art made by real people down the trash chute just to make a quick buck. So no, I don't want to support Warner, and I won't be using HBO Max. And I will risk getting booked by the Federal Bureau of Investigation by saying this. I'm human. I will admit, I love a lot of Disney's earlier stuff. Nightmare Before Christmas, Treasure Planet, Luca, all of the other less niche ones that don't make me sound like an effing nerd. Okay, well, Luca's not an old film, but you get my point. No matter what your thoughts on Disney are as a company, you must admit there is a Disney movie you probably have some inkling towards. And I want to watch a lot of these, but I simply do not want to support Disney. Cutting a transgender episode out of one of their shows, laying off dozens of animators who worked on Inside Out so they wouldn't be given the bonuses for the movie making $1 billion. They are disturbingly unethical, and I don't want to support that. So if I want to watch something Disney made, I would rather do it in a way that doesn't financially benefit them. This is definitely a more niche and person-by-person justification for piracy, but I don't think it's an ignorable one. It's one of the main reasons I would pirate if I was a pirate, hypothetically. Please, I don't want to go to jail. I'm not built for it. So what about this? A piece of media comes out that's from a company I like and is readily available and will always be available. What is the justifiable reason then? Okay, but like, what if the pirated version is just better? This is mainly speaking of the video game emulation side of things, but that doesn't mean it can't apply to shows and movies as well. To bring up Simpsons for a third time, when they came to Disney Plus, initially they were forced to a 16:9 aspect ratio, when they were originally intended to be presented in a 4:3 aspect ratio, which meant the top and bottom of the screen would be cropped. If you don't see why this is a problem, imagine watching any show like this. It felt crunched and completely ruined some of the visual gags. I have no idea why they even thought that was something they should do. They did fix this later, admittedly, but for a time being, the legal way to watch The Simpsons was the worst way. Or how about the Blu-ray versions of Star Wars that added a bunch of new CGI that made the originals look ugly? There are definitely more cases, but I can't think of any others, so we're stopping. But this point is more intended for the video game side of this, which is definitely more prevalent. A lot of the time, companies will release ports, remasters, and remakes of their video games. And in far too many cases, a lot of them just aren't up to snuff. Sonic Origins was a remaster of the first 4 Sonic games, and is fine enough for what it is, but a lot of people who are way more attentive than I am noticed a little too much was different between the originals and the remasters. The pixel art wasn't nearly as sharp, the physics were messed up in several locations, the audio was mixed really weirdly, just a menagerie of problems. In a lot of ways, making the originals better for more seasoned players. Luckily, alongside the Origins coming out, they delisted all of the originals. A lot of the problems with Origins have since been fixed, but at launch, there was simply no disputing that the fan efforts had yielded better versions of these games. Sonic 3 Air, or Angel Island Revisited, is a ROM hack of Sonic 3 made by the fans that is definitively better. Sonic Origins put the game in a new engine which messed up a lot of stuff, while Air is the original just with more bells and whistles to make it preferable to a lot of people. Like seriously, playing Air, then Origins, then the original all back to back to get footage of this video, it made Origins look like I was playing it on one of those aftermarket Sega Genesis mini consoles. I may not be a huge Sonic guy, but I loved Angel Island Revisited. Something I can speak on behalf of that I know slightly more about though is Pikmin. Pikmin Squared is another ROM hack, this time of Pikmin 2. Remaking the entirety of Pikmin 1 inside of its engine, bringing all of the quality of life features alongside it, like Pikmin sprouting faster, improved AI, the works. Anything Nintendo's official remaster of Pikmin on the Switch could have done had no chance of competing with this. Yes, these two instances are not piracy, it's emulation, it's similar but not the same. But the point is though, that more times than it should be, fans can deliver better and more in-depth remasters and sometimes better remakes of these old games. I mean, can you really blame me for wanting the best version of a game I already like? Hell, a game I already own in Pikmin's sake. We've talked a lot today, and some of this has been a hard act to follow, I'll admit. But most importantly, you could probably come up with a justification for not pirating in response to a lot of this. You don't need to enjoy the best version of a game. If you're that committed to a show or topic, you should just buy it physically or deal with the high streaming prices. And sure, for all of those things that will be lost media without piracy, you might have a point, but nobody's really getting harmed when you pirate those things, so who cares? But I have one last defense that I think is undisputable, something that cannot be argued with, and that is accessibility. You've probably seen those YouTube VPN sponsors where some schmuck goes on about how The Office isn't available in my country, but if I switch my VPN to Mars, then I can watch Quumpy's Adventures in a Log, which is pretty low on the rung of why I use a VPN, but that's not related. What I'm trying to get at though is, what if The Office isn't available in your country? And more so, what if nothing is? As free as the internet is for us, it isn't for everybody. Ethiopia, Singapore, Myanmar, Russia, Iran, China, Turkmenistan. This is just a handful of countries that have government-controlled media. Forget the high streaming prices, there is no streaming. Forget the best version of something, there are no versions. This was the last Asian protester I ever saw, so forget about that too. Forget a missing episode of The Simpsons, there is no Simpsons. The point I'm trying to make is that for somebody who lives in a heavily restricted country like one that I've just mentioned, piracy is damn near required to watch or do anything. That's not even the end of regional problems either. A lot of online stores simply refuse to translate the prices of their games. 100 United States dollars converts to roughly 580 Brazilian real. And using Astrobot on the PSN store as an example, it is 300 real in Brazil and $60 for us. And converting 300 real to USD, we get roughly $51, making it seem like the game is actually cheaper in Brazil. What this fails to factor in though is the Brazilian minimum wage at 1,500 reals a month. Meaning Astrobot, which is easily affordable for someone in the States, is 1/5 of the monthly minimum wage in Brazil. Forget the high streaming prices, that's absurd! Indian rupee, Mexican peso, Turkish lira. All of these game prices spike absurdly when switching to different countries. A lot of people in some countries simply can't afford the asking price on top of not getting the opportunity at all. Would you really blame somebody who lives in Brazil for pirating when the alternative is bankrupting themselves? Let me put that Brazilian thing in perspective real quick. The absolute lowest minimum wage in America right now is $7.50. But from what I've seen in real life and my incredibly bare bones research, it's averaging around $15 an hour. But let's be generous and just use the lowest extreme for this example. Since Astrobot for somebody in Brazil is 1/5 of their minimum wage a month, using the bare minimum of $7.50 an hour would give us $1,200 a month. Or comparatively, $240 for Astrobot. This isn't even the only game on there like this. Pretty much every game on the PlayStation Network isn't priced accordingly in any region, and regional currencies aren't the only border problem going on here. Region locking is another one. My favorite game of all time I had to play illegally because there was no legal method. Mother 3 has only received a fan translation and has been stuck in Japan officially for almost 20 years now. This isn't just a problem with Japanese games that never get brought over to English. What about all of those other languages that constantly get snubbed from translation? Like, what was the last time you saw a game that supports Swahili? Sometimes for people to actually be able to understand a show or game or really anything, they need mods or a hacked version that supports their native language. In short, would you rather simply pirate or have incomplete versions of shows, have it be a complete hat toss on what service they'll be on, pay absurd prices, go physical and take up your entire wall with like 5 movies, play non-definitive and sometimes bastardized versions of older games with no convenient ways of experiencing the original, support corporations who hate you, and spend $240 fucking dollars on Astrobot? Your choice! You know, I don't like piracy. I wouldn't blame you if your brain just quadruple taked at that statement, but it's true. I don't like piracy. And it's unfortunate that I, for legal reasons, am jokingly in support of it. 13 years ago on The Escapist, Gabe Newell, owner of Valve and Steam, somewhat infamously stated that piracy was merely a service problem.
If a pirate offers a product anywhere in the world, 24/7, purchasable from the convenience of your personal computer, and the legal provider says the product is region locked, will come to your country 3 months after the US release, and can only be purchased at a brick and mortar store, then the pirate's service is more valuable.
The best part about this, except for him being Scottish for some reason, is that he's 100% correct. Piracy to Steam isn't some illegal backdoor that dirty criminals use in order to access their content because they're evil. To them, it's a more convenient way for people to access content. Steam isn't trying to defeat piracy, it's trying to compete with piracy. And in my opinion, it's winning. I have never pirated a video game if I could just buy it on Steam. It enables me to play it on my Steam Deck. Everything is nicely sorted in my library. Things regularly go on sale, and it has a generous refund service. Steam is simply more convenient than piracy. It's never been about not paying, it's always been about the ease of access. What if somebody only has one arm and the only way they can play a video game is through an emulator because of the extra control options? What if somebody's one of those countries I couldn't pronounce the name of? What if somebody simply can't afford the high prices of streaming? Piracy shouldn't be seen as an end-all be-all to these companies' wallets. Instead, it should be seen as the competitor that it is. is. If we lived in a world where everything was available at all times, everywhere to everyone, and it was affordable, then piracy would almost immediately die. That's why barely anybody pirates new releases of video games, because Steam exists. Emulation is only necessary because companies like Nintendo don't supply us with their own version of it. Let me give you an example real quick. Metroid Samus Returns and Metroid Prime Remastered. Samus Returns was a remake of Metroid 2 on the 3DS, and Metroid Prime Remastered is about what it says on the tin. At the same time both of those were being created, fan recreations of both of these games were also being made. For Metroid 2, a fan game by the name of AM2R served to completely remake the game using its same environments and structures, but completely changing everything else about it. Even adding a new boss. And when Nintendo caught wind that fans were doing something they were doing but better, they issued it to be destroyed forever, never to be seen again. The problem here was that the fan version of the game was simply better, cut and dry. But when it comes to Metroid Prime's remaster, a team by the name of Etherlab had been working on a fan remaster of the game for a while up to that point. And when Nintendo announced and dropped their Metroid Prime remaster, the fan version pretty immediately became obsolete. That's because the official version was just better than anything they had cooked up. Yes, people had to pay for it, but they chose to buy it anyway. What I'm getting at is a vast majority of pirates would happily pay for something as long as it's easier or simply better than the pirated version. That's what Steam has been doing, and that's what the other companies need to do. Because I could imagine in the next 20 to 30 years, piracy is going to become a real problem for these guys. Only 20% of all content in 2024 was pirated. 1/5 of the internet is using a piracy site, and that number is only going to get higher if these companies don't switch up. I'm not trying to convince people to pirate. Federal crime, yada yada yada. I want this video to serve as a way for people who have always been against piracy to see why others do it and its advantages. So send this to a family member or friend who you think could use it. Pirates aren't criminals, morally speaking. They are just people. So in summary, piracy is more often than not a good thing, is only going to get more common unless companies like Disney and Netflix start treating them like competitors instead of thieves, and isn't the end of the world. And in a lot of cases, lets people experience more of it. The world, if that wasn't clear, or the more of the world. Anyway, hey, thanks for watching. I hope I was able to change some of your perspectives and make you see some different perspectives. I've recently been told about this self-fulfilling prophecy thing I'm trying to get working, so I am going to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of this year, and you will help me. And if you want to be like one of these cool cats off to the right here, you can join my memberships. I have more videos just like this one in the works, so I don't know how to finish that sentence.